Hi, Rod Kane here with the Washington Grand Company. Today I want to spend a little bit of time talking to you some more about my favorite medieval and ancients miniature war game, Triumph. Um, this is going to be a little bit different than my previous videos because I got some requests to do horsebow knight interaction and explain a little bit more how that works. And I decided that I would use that opportunity to also show off an actual historical battle. So today we'll be talking about the Battle of Hattin, the forces that were involved, and a little bit of history about the battle. But it's going to be a little bit unique because we are going to look at horsebow and knight interaction. We're going to look at jav cav as well, and I'm going to use this opportunity to kind of show how you can take the basic game of Triumph and turn it into a much larger historical battle. So we'll do a tour of the battlefield. We'll talk a little bit about the forces that are arrayed here, how I set up the battle, some special rules that I use to tweak the battle to try and recreate the historical feel of the battlefield. And then we'll go through some turns and the sequence of how the horsebow and the elite cav and the jav cav will face off against the heavy foot archers and knights of the Crusaders. And I hope that you'll stick with me and watch some of the video, and I hope it's enjoyable, and I hope it'll answer some more questions about how this interaction works in Triumph and why I think it works pretty well. So stick with us, and we're going to do a tour of the battlefield, and then we'll start pushing the miniatures around and showing how the combat works. Alright, so let's do a little tour of the battlefield. So I think most war gamers and historical buffs would be familiar with the Battle of Hattin, or if not, at least with the movie Kingdom of Heaven. Kingdom of Heaven did have a lot of historical characters in it, but it wasn't exactly true to history. So some of the characters you might remember, the Count of Tiberius, Raymond. He's actually the commander of the front guard at the Battle of Hattin, so this front force is commanded by Raymond. Guy de Lucerne was a real character, and he became king after the death of Baldwin IV, and he was actually a relative newcomer to the kingdom, and there was some discrepancy in his taking over the kingdom, but eventually everybody did kind of fall in line. And then you'll remember Balin of Ibelin was a famous character of the Star of Kingdom of Heaven, who did not fight at the battle in the movie, but did in real life, and he commanded the Rearguard. So in the Rearguard, we have Balin of Ibelin, a unit of Templar Knights, Guy de Lucerne, new king of Jerusalem, and Hospitaller Knights, and then Count Raymond, the experienced veteran in the Vanguard. Also accused, possibly unfairly, of treachery during this time period, but hard to tell whether he was really or not. I think it was more along the lines of he was just trying to get along in a territory surrounded by enemies. So opposing them, we have the forces of Saladin. And this battlefield is set up to be a triple-sized fight. So we have three 48-point Crusader army commands, and we have three 48-point Muslim commands surrounding them. So let's take a look at Balin's command. So Balin is commanding the rear guard of the Crusader forces. This represents the box formation that the Crusaders would form. They had learned that in order to avoid the archery and the skirmishing tactics of the Saracen forces, that they needed to set this defensive formation up so that their knights could be protected by their heavy foot and shielded by their archers, or an array of archers firing out at the enemy. And they would preserve their cavalry in the center until the time when it was necessary to charge. This represents the beginning of the Battle of Hattin, where they first become entrapped by the Saracens, but before they've actually no chance of surviving, because the battle took place over a course of 2 days, and the second day they were pretty much no hope of them escaping. So this is where they still have an effective fighting force. The army consists of knights, as you can imagine. So we have the order knights, the conventional knights, the knight general, and then one unit of Turcopole horsebows in the back of this command. We have our bow levy, heavy foot, and then archers. Now, one special rule that I made for this scenario is that in this particular scenario, these archers do not have ranged fire. So instead of being the normal 4-point unit, They're 3 points in value. They have the same combat stats in close combat as regular archers, but they don't have large volleys of arrows. They're exhausted by the heat and the lack of water, so they will not fire at range for the purposes of this game scenario. So that's the command for Ebling's Rearguard. The center command, or Guy's command, similar. We don't have the Turcopole horsebow. We have knights, knight general, another knight, the order knights, and then some order spear. And these are the only spear on the battlefield, because they're the only heavy foot with long pointy sticks that are actually experienced in fighting cavalry. The rest of them are heavy foot archers, bow levy. So similar command with a slight difference there. I should also mention that the 2 stands of order knights, both the Hospitallers and the Templars, are also fighting as if they are generals, so they have a plus to their combat factor, similar to a general's unit, so a little bit more elite, and I made that as a special rule for this scenario. However, they're also not out of command. They still need the command points from their main command, but they're never out of command, so no matter how far they are from the general, they can still fight and move and maneuver for 1 command pip. So, the forward command, this is a mirror image of Ebling's command, and it basically consists of the bow levy up front, heavy archers, heavy foot and archers surrounding the sides or flanks, knights, and a unit of Turcopoles in the center. So let's talk a little bit about Saladin's forces. So first of all, we have our elite cavalry general representing Saladin himself. His command has actually been beefed up by 1 extra horsebow, so this is not actually a 48-point command, but a 52-point command. That represents a balancing force against the Templars and the Hospitallers being a little bit tougher than regular knights, as well as the tactical situation of they had a slight advantage in this battle. Still trying to make it an even or balanced battle for the purposes of a convention game. He has some skirmishers and some light foot here near this village, and an additional Jav, Cav, and Horsebow command, as well as Lightfoot here. His sub-general that's blocking the way to the Hattin well, or water location, has Elite Cav and Horsebow, limited Jav, Cav, and Elite Cav, and then the Rabble and Lightfoot on the hill. A identical or nearly identical force for the third sub-general, and those are both 48-point forces. So as you can see, a very mobile force for the Saracens, as you'd expect, and from somewhat more static force for the Crusaders. I'll explain a little bit about the terrain. All of the hills that you see on the battlefield are considered gentle hills. The only one big enough to give any kind of bonus is this large hill with the smoke in front of it. There is a small amount of rough hill when you get over here to the actual horns of Hattin. These little bumps here would be considered rough, and they would give an uphill advantage, but they're very small and only can hold about 1 unit of men anyway. The smoke, represented by the cotton, for the purposes of this game will be treated like woods. It blocks line of sight, and it's considered difficult or rough terrain for any forces that go into it, because it also disrupts communication and formation. So if the heavy or the close order foot were to go in there, or the mounted were to go in there, their visibility would thus be hampered, and their maneuver and ability to maneuver would be hampered, as well as their combat ability. It doesn't hurt the Lightfoot or the Rabble, of course. They can go in there just fine. The villages that you see will also act as woods, so if any troops were to go in here, they would provide a difficult or rough terrain advantage for the light troops and a penalty for the mounted and the closed order foot. So the purpose of the game is, or the objective of the game for the Crusaders, escape. The Crusaders can escape off of the battlefield in this direction towards Hattin. They can also escape off the battlefield by reversing course and heading back in the way that they came, both of those locations taking them to water. So at this point, what we'll do is we'll start rolling some dice, and we'll see how well our Crusaders can do against the forces of the Saracens. So for this scenario, using Grand Triumph, we normally assign a command die per command. So in this example, the Crusaders have 3 commands, they'll have 3 dice. So what we'll do is the blue is for the king, the black is for Raymond, and Balin of Eberling will be the yellow dice. And so we would roll their command pips, or each player would roll for their commands, and they start out pretty good. So we have 4 things that we can do, 5 things for Balin, and 6 for the center. So the Crusaders are going to go first, and they're going to try and figure out a battle plan to work their way out of this trap. So stay with us, and we're going to move the Crusader forces, and we're going to figure out what we can do next. Okay, so we'll take a look at the options for Raymond's command. And I think Raymond's command is going to start by marching the bow levy forward. They're massive 2 MUs of movement. Make a little space for the knights and the mounted to deploy. So that'll be one of his command pips. Out of the other command pips that he has available, he's going to try and swing this formation over and essentially wheel for 1 command pip. His infantry, and then he has 2 command pips left out of 4, and we're going to use the last 2 to bring the knights up, and we're going to do essentially 2 columns here. So this guy will wheel and move, bringing the ones behind him with, and so we're going to have him lead from the front, and we'll pull those back a little bit. We'll try and form up. He is going to wheel, and once again not exceeding his total movement, pull up, bringing the other knight with. And as well, we have to check and make sure every knight can make it. They got to pull back a little bit, so we'll pull our first column back a little bit. And they wheel, and that's how you move 2 columns. So that would have actually been 1 pip to wheel and move forward as a column, another pip to wheel and move forward as a column. So that is the move for the front command. So you can see, much like the historical battle, Raymond's going to try and punch a hole through the Saracens in front of him and head down the hill. So for the second command, well, now the bow levy are open order, so the mounted could charge through if they wanted to come up here and join. But we're going to try and turn these guys to protect our flank slightly, and unfortunately they are incredibly slow. So actually just turning in place and getting his corner to here is going to be basically the entire bow levy move. They're not much use against the foot that are up in the hills, so I think we're going to bring the other bow levy in a similar move closer to the front where he might actually be useful, because he's not going to do much good against that foot that's on the hill anyway. And then at this point, the problem that the Crusaders face is the ability to deploy. Now, he had 6 command points. So with the 6 command points and having moved those, we have 4 command points left, which is enough to slide the infantry over or possibly do something with the mounted. I think at this point, probably we're going to try and bring the mounted forward slightly. But first, give them a little bit more room to maneuver. So we're going to bring this line forward. They can come forward 3, but we're only going to bring them forward to about here. And give them a little bit more room in the center to maneuver. So that line comes forward. So that leaves them 3 command pips left. There is no enemy within 8 MU of the bow levy. So the bow levy are actually going to conduct a march move and move another 2MU. So that was 1, 2, 3. We can put them there. That's 4. And we'll just turn it around and back up the archers. 5. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 command pips. And now we're going to bring these knights forward. We're going to try it anyway. Knights are going to come forward. Leave the spear behind. And basically the king and Raymond's forces are starting to head that way to see what they can do in the front of the column. Now, let's move to the third command. Well, since the Crusaders know that they got to get 2 of the commands off, one of them's got to be the king, and they've kind of decided to head towards Hattin and the well that's there. Looks like Balin and Evelyn will be the sacrificial lamb in this particular plan. So with his 5 pips, I think he's also going to maneuver and try and get a little bit of room to hold off Saladin's forces. So I think we're going to use 1 command pip to bring this line forward slightly, create a little bit of maneuver space. So that'll be 1 command pip. With another command pip, we're going to bring the Knights Templar around and essentially put them behind the bow levy, ready to attack, because that's about all the maneuver that they can do when they're spinning completely around. Same thing with these knights, is they're going to spin around. So that's 1, 2, 3 out of his 5. We now have a situation where we have no fallback position for these heavy foot, so I think the heavy foot are going to advance forward slightly, at least give them 1 fallback, and we'll move far enough to give them a base width. So they'll end up with 1 base width here for the knights to deploy should they choose to. So we're moving our line here. And these will move up as well. That'll cut off the horse from sneaking through the gap in the smoke. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4. Once again, we don't have enemy within 8, but if they were to move again, they would be within 8, so it's not going to work to march move. So I think what we'll do at this point is we'll bring a horse bow up to plug this gap, make sure there's no gap there, and that'll be it for Balin's force. So now it'll be time to move to the Saracen's turn. Just to give you an overview of the battlefield, you can see the knights are trying to make their escape. We don't know if this is going to work or not, and we'll see how the Saracens react. Okay, Saladin's forces, it's their turn to roll for command points. Saladin, who is the red die, only got 1 command point. His sub-generals didn't do much better, so we have 1 and we have 4. So we'll assign those to our commands. We have 4 in the rear guard, and we have 1 in the front. So the Saracens are starting off a little bit slow here. So we'll take a second and we'll figure out what are their options in reaction to the Crusaders' movements. Well, with 1 command pip, I think that Saladin is going to want to push some of these fast horse up to where they're within striking range. Maybe not go in yet because they're out of range, but within striking range of the Crusader forces. So I think we're going to bring these light horse up. We've got a horse bow and some javelin cavalry. We don't want to get too close because we've got the speed on the side of the Saracens, and if they get really close, then the foot can dictate the battle, but we want to at least be close enough to strike and cause some concern or worry on the part of the Crusaders. So that'll be Saladin's 1 command pip. Up front, Choices. Not a lot of good options. The Crusaders are in a very non-battle-like formation. They don't want to fight like this. But unfortunately, the Saracens didn't get enough command pips to really take advantage of it. Would like to go in on those bow levy with the elite with the elite cavalry and the horsebow. Unfortunately, bow levy are one of the troops that can actually kill these guys in a straight fight. So if they go in, they want to go in with an advantage. So at this point, I think I would actually use this command pip to fan out some of the horsebow so that when we do go in, we'll be in a little bit better battle line, maybe get some overlaps, have a chance to shatter or kill some of the bow levy. Moving to the rear command. So on the rear, we have 4 command pips. We have Balin of Eberlin trying to set up a defense. I think we're going to have to push that defense and see if we can at least try to crack that command. So once again, let's move our light horse, our javelin cavalry, and our horsebow into attack range. So moving these up and getting them within range of our bow levy. We're going to stay out of the zone of control because we don't really want to be in their zone of control unless they come to us, but at least get close enough that we can move in and make an attack. And that would have been 1 command pip to go in there. That looks good there. Pressing with the other mounted forces, we'll do a similar thing. We don't really have to measure this one because we know they can go 6, so they have, or 8 with the lights and 6 with the cavalry. Plenty of range. That would be 2. And we're actually going to not risk our general and go 3, 4 and reposition these. So 1, 2, 3, 4 to get these 2 in there sideways, leaving the general behind just a little ways because we don't want to rush him right into combat yet and lose command control. So that's it for the Saracens move with their command pips. Let's see what the Crusaders can do next. Okay, let's roll the King's command points. 1 for the King, 3 for Raymond, and 5 for Balin. So it looks like Balin's going to be doing a little bit of the fighting this time. And let's see. Looking at our options here, we've got to come up with a plan that gets them out of this terrible position and into a combat that they have some kind of advantage or opportunity. So let's see what we can do with the maneuvering next. Alright, so after some musing, we've decided to do something completely crazy, which is we're going to attack with the bow levy. So the bow levy are going to go forward at their amazingly blistering fast speed of 2 mu. And now, for something truly fun, our horsebow, which is an open order troop and is passing through another open order troop, is going to go right through, clip the corner, moving no more than 8, and end up on the flank of the bow levy. So now you see we've extended our line of bow levy. Still a little bit dangerous because of what could happen over here. And now the knight is going to try and close up on the other flank. Can't quite get there, but it could help over here. So our knight is actually going to come around and try to cover the other flank in case this horsebow tries to get on the Turcopole horsebow. At least there's some help in sight. So that makes our bow levy line a little bit more dangerous. Maybe makes the Saracens think a little bit more before they come in. But that's all 3 command pips, so we've got nothing else that we can do in the front. 1 command pip. What do we do with 1 command pip for the King? Well, very, very limited options. Can't quite get the bow levy up there, but I think we can at least, well, we can pass them through. Now they can't quite make it that far. Boy, not a lot of good options for the King. I think he's just going to move this bow levy up, form a line there, and that's his 1 command pip. Now, the brave Eberlin Well, we had a plan. We might as well stick with that plan. We're going to bring the Templars out. That's one command pip. And we'll actually, we might as well do this since we can. We're going to move the Templars forward so they're in zone of control and they're slowing down the faster light horse. We're going to bring the bow levy up at the same time. That's 2 command pips out of our 5. And we want to bring these knights over here and see if we can stop the advantage. Now that leaves our flank horribly, horribly exposed. So that was 1, 2, 3 command pips. And we've got 2 more command pips. And I think at this point, we're actually going to have to measure this one, because this is going to be limiting the range. Let's see. So we have 2 more command pips out of the 5. And I think we're going to have to bring this foot unit up to try and slow down the assault and stop this horsebow unit from getting in on the flank of this unit. He'd sure like to have these archers next to him. Let's see, how close can I get the archers? If I'm moving these individually, oh, that doesn't leave any spot for a fallback. So we're going to move them up a little bit further. And the archer's just going to have to be a little bit further back. We're going to pull these closer. Just enough for the bow levy to go with their max movement, which would have been 2 MU. And he is right at the border. Let's see if the archers can get there. The archers can get there, and he can line up on them. All right, I don't like it because of the fallback, but it's tight. So we can fall back through there if we lose a combat. The archers can get to there, and we have a line. It doesn't really protect this flank. So in reality, he's not protected, but any other position puts these troops too much at risk and creates a hole. So that was his... that's it. That's 5 pips for Eberlin. So now we have to see... we haven't got combat yet. Let's see what the Saracens can do with their command rolls, and we'll see what happens next. Okay, Saladin's going to roll. Oh, and we have cocked die, but now we have 4, 4, and 1. So I should point out that Gulk Bori, who is the commander of the rear, that's the one we've used the green dice for. I know I'm pronouncing that terribly. And Taki Aldin, the commander of the forces blocking Hattin, and then Saladin's dice. So let's see what they can do. Once again, 1 command pip for the blocking force. I think with that 1 command pip, they're still going to play the game of my line is longer than your line and try to undo what the Crusaders just did. They've still got time before the Knights can form. It's very tempting to run in there with the fast-moving cavalry and hit that heavy foot on the flank, but then the Knights are going to hit you on, and so it might not end very well. And the Saracens don't want to get into that formation. They want to stay on the outside where they can dance. Saladin has some options now, so he's got 4 command pips. Well, with 4 command pips, he could actually start to do something. And I think the first thing he's going to do is exactly what we were concerned about, which is we can spin off a horsebow and we can hit that horsebow in the flank. So that's what he's going to do. We're going to run over here and hit this horsebow in the flank. It would have been better to have these guys charging at the same time, but they're going for that longer line and playing a longer game. And the horsebow's counting on the flank advantage, helping him out, because if he wins, that one doesn't have a fallback. Now the question is, does he bring the javelin cavalry over to help out? And the javelin cavalry has the range to come in and be on the flank and support. And it's going to go right in there. And then because of that knight hanging out right there, we're going to bring the other jav cav as well. So that whole unit, and that would be 3 command points, because we're moving obliquely across the battlefield. It wasn't a wheel and a move. They had to use their whole move to go sideways like that. That's an oblique move, and that took 3 command points. Now the reason for doing this, as you can see, I have a flank attack here with this horsebow. I also have an overlap here because this corner is on the rear corner of the other enemy horsebow. So that's going to give him an advantage by taking this guy down, -1 for the flank and -1 for the overlap. So with 3 command pips, I think that's a worthwhile move to try and break up that front formation. So Saladin has got 1 command pip left. What is he going to do? Well, there's no real reason to go hit the guys directly in front of him, because you could win and you could also get into a lot of trouble. He could bring these guys up to support, which might not be a bad idea. He could also try to overwhelm or help with the situation over here. He does have a command problem in that there's a village between his light troops and his command stand. These olive trees here, they're just for looks, but that village blocks line of sight. So he doesn't have command control over these light troops on the other side of the village. So he will not be able to order them with 1 command pip. So I think in that particular situation, what he would probably do or consider doing is maybe sending a javelin cavalry or a horsebow over to help out with that situation over there, or move his light troops up to support this attack in the front. So I think we're going to move the light troops up a little ways so they're going to be closer to where they need to be to support this front attack. So that would be 1 command pip to bring them up, and then that way they are not too far back. Oh, but I remembered something really important. Well, we'll risk it 1 turn. The Javcav don't panic versus Knight. Horsebow do. So if these were Horsebow, I wouldn't want these behind them, because if they were to panic, when they fall back and turn and start their run, if they run into anything that gets in their way, they disperse. So they're destroyed. But in this case, it's Javcav. That doesn't really apply. So that's okay. We're going to bring them up to support. All right. We have 4 command pips in the rear. What to do, what to do? Well, I think we've got to go all in and see what happens. So we have a move where this line would move forward for 1 command pip, and you notice when they move directly forward, they're slightly off. That's where that slide comes into play. So because they're within 2 MU, or actually in contact with the enemy, they're allowed to make that oblique move as a line. They didn't exceed their total movement, obviously, so that would be 1 command pip to push that line in. Well, with a 2nd command pip, things that make you go, Oh, and by the way, remember I talked about the archers don't have range fire. The reason we didn't do archery fire in this one is because these are low level, or 3-point archers suffering from thirst. So for this special scenario rule, they don't have range combat. They're very effective in close combat against mounted, but that's representing point blank fire. So they don't have the volley fire they would normally have. So we didn't do that fire for that reason. So with 3 command pips, I really think we've got to bring this guy in on the flank. So we bring him in on the flank. Just clears the zone of control of this unit, because that will trap this knight so that he cannot fall back from the horsebow, which is good. Javcav shatter knights, which is good if he wins. Knights can also kill Javcav. The problem is, if this guy doesn't do well and loses tonight, this one will fall back, and he doesn't have any place to go, and he'll get destroyed. That's not great. So the question is what to do with him. So I've got 2 command points left. Well, the Javcav is the best bet against the archers because it's a +3 versus foot. The tricky part there is I'm going to end up in a situation where things cannot fall back. So I think what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to move this Javcav, and I'm going to use one of my command pips to put him basically on the other side Actually, we're going to use 2 command pips. We're going to move the horsebow first and get him out of the way. One base, we're going to put him 1 base width away. That's 1 command pip, and that's 2. So you might ask, well, why did I do that little shuffle step thing? And the reason I did that is I only had 2 command pips, so I could move 2 units. They have plenty of movement. They're open order through open order. But I don't want the horsebow against the foot. They don't do as well. So if I do in the future charge this group in, I want jav-cav on archers, jav-cav on heavy foot, horsebow providing overlap. That would be my preference. So that's my 4 command pips down here, and now we're going to have some combat rolls. So we're going to pause for a second, and we'll start at the front of the column, and we'll do our combat rolls, working our way to the back. Okay, so let's do our first combat. As I mentioned earlier, so we have a horsebow hitting another horsebow in the flank with support. This horsebow would have been a 3 versus mounted. It's down 2 to a 1, and this horsebow is going to be a 3. The black die is for the Turcopole horsebow, and the white die is for the Saracen horsebow. Okay, so we have a 4 versus 5. Now, unfortunately, the Turcopole horsebow, when it turns, it has to replace this corner with this corner, and then it has to fall back. It cannot fall back a full base depth, so it's trapped. It will be destroyed. So that's the first kill. So we now have the Saracen is doing a little bit better, the poor lonely bow levy with no support. So now we're going to move to our other commands at the rear of the Crusader column. So the rear of the Crusader column, we're probably going to start on the end where we have the knights overlapping, surrounding the by the horsebow. So the knights, which will be Crusaders, will be the blue die again. They would have normally been a 4 versus mounted, but they are overlapped, so they're going to be a 3. So it takes them down to a 3, and the horsebow are going to be a 3 versus mounted. So we have a 3 to 3. So the knights being down 1 for this overlap or flank contact. So in this situation, the front unit is the combat unit. This guy is just providing support. If there was no horsebow here, then the combat would be to the flank like we had on the other roll. Eberling will be the yellow die and the green die for the Saracens. So we'll roll that one first. And not so good for the knight. So we have 7 to 4. We didn't double, which is important for the horsebow because that means they don't charge forward. But the knight cannot retreat, so the knight is destroyed. And the non-doubling is good because that means they don't charge deeper. Maybe they didn't want to break formation yet. Jav-cav. We'll just go down the line at this point. They're normally a 3 versus foot. The bow levy are normally going to be a 3 versus mounted, but now they have an overlap. So the jav-cav have a slight advantage in that we have a 2 to their 3. And then rolling once more. But this time we have an 8 to a 6. So the jav-cav are going to back up. So they fall back. Now that's important for the bow levy because the bow levy are shattered by the mounted. So if the mounted had won by 1 point, they would have destroyed the bow levy. But never underestimate the bow levy. So we have a small problem now because these horsebow, they're only a 2 versus foot, but they're overlapped. So now they're only going to be a 1. And as I mentioned, now mounted will shatter bow levy in the open. But bow levy can actually kill these guys. They don't dance away from bow levy. And these bow levy are going to have their full combat factor of 3 because they have no overlap. So we got to think about this. So as the Saracen general, would I do this combat or this combat? Now in this situation, the jav-cav would be a 2. These are, as I mentioned before, a knight general. The Templars fight like a knight general. So they would start out at a 4, go up to a 5. So it'd be 5 to 2. They can shatter. However, if these guys disappear, then that's going to make this even worse. But, oh, you know what? We're already heading down the line this way. They're both bad. Let's go ahead and see if the horsebow can get lucky. So, and the horsebow do not get lucky, but they don't die. So, in this situation, we have a 9 to a 6, which means they're just going to back off and they're not going to die. So, not dying is good in that particular case. But now our poor Javcav on the end are going to be a 2 down to a 1. And our Knight General Templars are going to be a 5. So they're 4 plus 1. Javcav can shatter the Knights. That would be a big win for the Saracens at this point. But they don't. So we have a 6. And we have a 9. Now the good news is they also don't die, because they have to be doubled by the Knights to be killed. They can shatter Knights. The Knights have to double them. So Javcav are going to pull back. And as we've mentioned before, Knights, as we saw in our Macedonian Pike video, the Knight General, Knights always charge forward when they win, even if they don't double. So the Templars are pretty much committed until they either win or die at this point. So that's it for our combat in this round. So now it's going to be the Crusaders' command points. So we'll roll those and we'll see what happens next. So we're getting ready to roll the command pips for the Crusaders. I thought I'd do a quick overview of the tactical situation. So a little bit of trouble here. We lost a horsebow. That puts a little bit of a pressure on the front of the column, and we're still not in a very good position. Guy is still in the middle, lacking command points to do anything. And Eberlin is starting to take it a little bit on the chin, because he's lost at least one stand of knights, and we could have a breakthrough from the Saracens in the rear. So let's roll command pips for Guy's forces and see what happens. Okay, so we have 3 for the front of the column. We have 2 for the king himself, and we have 4 for Eberlin, who's going to have to make those 4 count. So let's take a minute and see what our options are, and then we'll move them and we'll roll our combats. Okay, so Raymond's doing a little bit of planning here, and he's kind of got a bit of a pickle. So, overmatched bow levy here, too many mounted on the flank, only one knight in position to do anything. Now this knight is in zone of control of 2 units and is zone of controlling, projecting onto these 2 Javcav as well. But that leaves this horsebow completely free and radical to do whatever it wants. So I think what we're going to do at this point is we're actually going to scooch this knight over so that he is projecting a zone of control onto this Javcav and onto this horsebow. Now, normally this is a bad situation, not leaving a unit a place to fall back. However, since these mounted would all shatter, all the mounted that are faced off against the bow levy would shatter that bow levy, it doesn't need a place to fall back. It dies where it's standing. So it doesn't really matter that our knight is in that position. And at the same time, he's covering the flank of the bow levy. So that's 1 command pip. So he's only got 2 left. So what can he do with 2? The Knights really wanted to come out and play, but now they're completely outmatched and potentially going to get surrounded until Guy can come up and help. So at this point, and we have this guy's zone of control with the Javcav, I think he's going to actually do the same maneuver and effectively slide over to here. And I got to make sure that he did not. Yeah, that's more than 2 MU for him, so he's going to have to stop about there. So he's going to come up closer, slide over, zone of control in that Javcav. And for the last pip, I think we're going to bring the archer over to help, because I'm kind of setting him up for the potential anyway. Let's make sure we did this move legal. I'm going to move him a maximum of 2 MU as far as he can go, leaving himself, he does need a fallback, of course. He's going to go up as close as he can get, moving 2, maintaining a fallback. I'll put him in line with the knight, remembering that his corners could not go more than 2. And then the archer can go 3, so the archer isn't in anybody's zone of control, but he can run right up here next to him. So the idea here is I now have the Javcav being threatened by the slower moving foot, everybody in zone of control, which removes their speed, which is really useful for the slower. When a slower moving force can get zone of control on the faster moving force, it cuts away their speed, and that's useful for the Crusaders. Unfortunately, that's the only command pips they have, so they can't do anything with the Knights in the center. Guy is going to have to figure out what to do with his 2 pips so that he can support. And now to do something completely crazy, I'm going to use one of the command pips to bring the open order Knights and pop them through to the other side. Let's check our distance to our Saracens. Yeah, the Saracens are still too far away to actually hit that Knight. But because of the open order nature of the troops, they can pass through like that. It takes a command pip. He's going to pop through the open order foot, and he's ready to maybe come and help and untangle this mess that we have from the column. Guy has one more command pip. For that last command pip, I think he's going to move his Knights forward and try and get closer. That's well within his movement range to the front and try and make something happen up front. If they could attack that front command with more Knights. So, pretty crazy situation in the front. Don't know. It depends on what the Saracens get for command pips. Let's move to the back. So in the back of the column, we have our heroic Balin of Eberlin, who's still making a stand. He has 4 command pips. He has a bit of a situation here in that his rear command is possibly going to get overwhelmed. I think he's going to have to bring some of those Knights around. So we'll position the camera and we'll make a couple of moves with the Knights. Okay, so we have to deal with the slowest moving corner. So in order to get this Knight turned around, he's going to end up about there, which does put him in range to do something, but next turn possibly. And the same thing for Eberlin, so we're going to bring him around, and he'll end up basically being in the back corner. I would have preferred to have him in a group, but if I put him in a group, then this guy won't be in range to actually hit. That's 2 command pips. Well... Now I could use the heavy foot to hit this guy in the flank, but all they would do is chase the horsebow away, even if they were to double them, so it's not very useful. The bow levy charging into that hole, possible that we could buy some time, but it's also possible that they could get killed. What we could do is use the bow levy against the to get rid of the overlap, try to drive these off, and then work our way down, and we might get lucky. So what the heck? Let's go ahead and make that move. So that's one more command pip to charge these guys in. And now that I have the Knights turned around in support, I don't feel so bad about that move. So that was 1, 2, 3. We have 1 command pip left. I don't see a lot of good options at this point, other than perhaps, remember I talked about my evil plan for the Saracens, which was to try to overlap this archer. We won't be able to stop that overlap, but we can at least bring this guy up in support to try and help. That's a little bit better. And let's see where we go from there. So we don't have combat in the front, we only have combat in the back. So we'll do the combat in the rear. Let's get our dice. Eberlin, it's the Crusader's turn, so Eberlin will decide the order of the combat. Well, he's got this really nice Templar Knight, which we've given a plus bonus to because they're Templars. So they've got a 5 versus mounted, and then the Jav Cav would be a 2, and it's straight up. That's a pretty good advantage and might pop a hole for us. We could go here where we have a 3 to a 2, so there's an advantage there, but they could be shattered and destroyed, and if they are, then it puts the Knights in trouble. So I think we're going to start with the more sure thing on the end, and we're going to work our way down and see if the Crusaders can do anything. Oh, and they do. So we have a 4 to an 11. So the Knights have done their job. They've doubled the Javelin Cavalry. That will kill them. And of course, they always charge forward. So that's much better looking for the bow levy in the center. So now the bow levy in the center, this horse bow is going to go down to a 1 because of the overlap. And the bow levy will still be at 3. So they have a little bit better chance of surviving. Oh, and the bow levy are on fire. They have doubled the horse bow and killed them. And in their excitement, the bow levy will charge forward. So it looks like the bow levy figured out that they can break out. Forget this rear guard action. They're going to go home. Well, that makes it a little bit better for the next bow levy. But the next bow levy is facing javelin cavalry. So javelin cavalry started a 3. They're going to drop to a 2 for the overlap. And the bow levy would have been a 3, but they're going to drop to a 2 because of their overlap. So they have a little tougher time. Let's see how they can do. Oh, and unfortunately, 5 to 7. So these bow levy are shattered. So they lose the combat. They're shattered by mounted in the open. They're not doubled, so the jav cav do not charge forward, but the bow levy are destroyed. So still a pretty good trade for the Crusaders because they traded a 4-point unit for a 2-point unit. And they do have the Knights coming up to hopefully plug that hole. And if the Templars can turn, they should be able to at least do their delaying action a little bit longer. So, all right, so now it's going to be the Saracens' command pips. All right, command pips for the Saracen side. And Saladin. We have 2, 4, and 3. So now he's got to see what he can do with those command pips. Let's take a look at our tactical situation again. So we have Saladin's command here, moving in on the front of the column. We have Taki Aldine over here. He's got 4 command pips, so he might actually be able to do something this time. And then in the rear, 2 command pips might actually present a problem because they are starting to have some issues with the Knights and the bow levy who have just broken through the rear horse guard. So let's start probably with the rear command, and we'll try and figure out what we're going to do there first. So here we are at the rear. The Saracens have this jav cav, which is sitting on the flank of the bow levy, which just gave me a really good idea. And then they have the horse bow versus the Knights, because we have Knights that are in charge range now, and that's not good for the horse bow. The horse bow do have the ability to dance away from the Knights, but it can be a problem if they don't have a clear path to retreat. So that could be a little tricky. The Saracens don't really want to go inside this territory and end up with their highly maneuverable mounted trapped inside the box. Even from the inside, it can be dangerous for them, and they lose their ability to maneuver away. But we might not have a lot of good options. So with 2 command pips, with 2 command pips, I think we're going to attack the bow levy with the jav cav, because it's a possible sure thing. We'll see. So the jav cav will attack the bow levy with 1 command pip, and then I have to decide what to do about that knight that's sitting over there. And I think we'll have this horse bow advance in support of the bow levy. That could be dangerous. The knight could charge in. I would have liked to have more so I could face off against the knight with the horse bow. Don't know yet. We'll have to see. But I think with that, I need to pop this bow levy and isolate the Templars if I'm going to take care of them in the rear. So let's move on to the front of our column and see what we're going to do up there. Alright, so we moved up to the front of the Crusader column and the battle between Taki Aldine, Saladin's forces, and Raymond. Let's take a quick look at the tactical situation. So the rear fight, kind of a mess. Rearguard still holding. Saladin's main force here on the slight rise is not engaged, but they haven't really had the command pips for it. So the battle... The center, not much action, but the battle's happening at both the front and the rear of the Crusader column. So we've got 4 pips, or command points, for Taki Aldine, we have 3 command pips for Saladin's forces, and let's see what we can do with them. Okay, so at the front of the column, we have a couple of interesting things playing out, and I'm going to see if we can figure out a way to make something happen here. So with the 3 command pips, I think that Saladin is going to use one of the command pips to move this 2 units as a group up and touch the knight. Now, because the knight is a single stand, being hit by a group movement that took 1 command pip, the knight will be forced to conform to the moving group. Now, that only happens because 1, he has the ability to conform, and 2, you can't make a single stand conform if you've taken away when it previously, if it had a fallback location and you take that back by making it take that away by making it conform. That doesn't happen. So if there had been some reason where this would change the fallback condition of the knight, it wouldn't happen. But knights are also shattered by jav-cav, so fallback for the knight is a moot point, so there's no reason we can't make them conform. So by doing that, the jav-cav have their 2 to the knight's normally 4, overlap for the horsebow makes it a 3. So it's possibly a good move because they can shatter the knights. We can't bring this jav-cav up to help, because he's in zone of control of these and they're in the way. He can't move forward to assist with the combat. But that does leave Saladin 2 more command pips to play with. And I think with those 2 command pips, we're going to move this infantry into a slightly better location. And both the Lightfoot and the skirmishers move 5. So I think we're going to use this opportunity to bring this infantry over onto a support location. Well, that could be a problem with the knights over here, but I think they need to be over here to support the attack that's going in the front, and we'll have to risk it because that'll give them... The knights now will not be able to charge across the front of these guys. They'll hit the Lightfoot, possibly chew the Lightfoot up, but we're sacrificing them to keep them off of the flanks of the more expensive and much more important javelin cavalry. So that was going to use 1, 2, 3 pips to do that. In fact, we'll even pull those back a little bit because they're really just supporting his flank. So they move over, they support his flank, they're projecting zone of control. The knight's going to have to deal with them, can't charge in. If the knight comes over to deal with them, then if the knight comes in and deals with their flank, perhaps Saladin will have the command pips to come in and hit the knight. So it's a case of who's going to get enough command pips to deal with it. So now that uses Saladin's command pips. We have command points for Taki Aldine. So now, this move going after the knight kind of messes up our chance of overlap on the bow levy. What might have been smarter would have been to use 2 command pips and move this in, but then I couldn't make the knight conform because I wouldn't have been moving as a group. So we're going to stick with what we've got. And it's time to make something happen up front. So let's give it a try. So we're going to move forward as a group for 1 command pip. These elite cavalry with a horsebow on the end. And they're going to move forward. Because they were moving as a group, what we're going to do, and this guy can't continue, he can drop back for free and come along for the ride. I'm not really sure if that was necessary, but we're going to do it in case he dies. We got something to plug the hole, or in theory. So he's going to come forward for free. It also demonstrates the fact that this line contracted to fit into this tighter space while moving as a group. So we have 3 command points left. And it's time for him to do something on the other side of the battlefield with that force, so let's get them into a different formation and prepare to meet the oncoming charge of the knights. So coming to the other side of the battlefield, and with our 3 remaining command pips, I think what we're going to do is we're actually going to expand or move our forces over, and these guys are going to move as 2 columns. So they're going to snake over as a column. They're going to snake over as a column. Follow them up. They've got more than enough movement to do that. But that's going to use all 3 command pips because I'm essentially moving this clump as one individual unit, one column, and another column. So that's going to use the remaining 3 command pips. And that will put them in position, hopefully, to deal with those knights when they come out of there or form up. Okay, let's do our combats. We're already at this end of the table, so we're going to do these combats first. So we have Saladin versus the knights. The knight would start at a 4, down 1 for the overlap. So our knight is going to be a 3. Let's put that out there just so we mark it. So our knight is a 3. And our javelin cavalry starts at a 2 and stays at a 2. So we have a 2 to a 3. Black die once again is for Raymond's forces. Red die for Saladin. And we have a 7 to a 7. So they lock. All right, so there's nothing happening there. They're just going to stay in combat. And then we're going to switch over to Taki Aldine. And he's going to start with the elite cav that has the overlapped bow levy. So the overlapped bow levy will be a 2. Elite cavalry versus foot is a 3. Black die is for the bow levy. And the bow levy get a 6 to 8. So bow levy in the open, shattered by mounted. They did not double them though, 6 to 8. So they will stay where they are, and the bow levy are destroyed. And that makes it bad for the next guy because he's going to have that same 2 to 3 disadvantage. So let's see what happens here. And this time we have an 8 to an 8, so we have a lock or tie. So one bow levy still remaining in the front, holding up that whole mass of horsemen. Now we're going to move to the back of the line. All right, so looking over our battlefields, you can see our squares have come apart a little bit, except the center is still holding. And we're back here with our Templar Knights and bow levy, but we only have one combat, and that's going to be the bow levy, which have been hit in the flank. And they have a guy on their rear corner, which means they are in overlap condition. So they're going to go from a 3 versus mounted down to a 1. And our javelin cavalry versus foot are a 3. So we have a 3 to 1. Bow levy will be shattered if they are beaten. Green die is for the Saracens. We have a 4 to a 3. They're beaten, not by much, but they are beaten. They are not doubled, but they are shattered by mounted in the open. So that's a loss for the bow levy. They'll go into our kill pile. We now have a dead even fight in the back with 4 points worth of Crusaders and 4 points worth of Saracens killed. So now we're going to move on to the Crusaders' turn. All right, Crusaders rolling in the circle again for their command points. Guy only has 1 command point. Rear command gets 5, and we have 4 for Raymond. So let's see what we can do with these command pips. Well, Raymond has a problem. 4 command pips does give him the opportunity to do something. So let's see what he can do with those. I think he's going to have to face the newly arriving cavalry on the scene and try and punch a hole. So that's what he's probably going to do. Let's move over to that side of the table and move our figures. So taking a look at the situation for Raymond, I think that he can bring his knights forward almost to the point where his infantry is lined up and form a line of defense there. And then what he's going to have to count on is he's going to have to count on Guy using his 1 pip to move the column forward and attempt to deal with these on-rushing Saracens at the front. So I think that's what we're going to do. So we're going to bring our commander forward to the center. The rearmost knight will come straight forward. And then I think we're going to peel 1 knight off to deal with the other Saracens that are coming at. So we're going to bring him over into this position, somewhere in here. We're going to line up this foot and we measured out that this guy had exactly 5 to get to the front, so he's going to end up on here. Well, the positioning would be such that we have Guy is there, Raymond is there, Knights on the support, extra for the flank. That's 3 command pips. Now for our last command pip, we're going to try and get a knight over here to cover Raymond's flank. So essentially he can get to this point and cover Raymond's flank, or at least that's the idea. So he's now projecting a zone of control to cover the flank. Little bit dangerous. We don't have a backup or rear for the general. We could move him over just a little bit. That would give him about 1 fallback before he's dead. He's still, I'll turn him a little bit, still projecting a zone of control into the area that we need. So that goes out 2 MU, or 1 base step. So he's still covering this flank. Pretty thin defensively for the Crusaders on this front. Guy's going to use his 1 command pip, and he's going to come forward because he really needs to get some help up here. The question is where to do it. I think we're going to do exactly what I said might be dangerous, and we're going to hit these light foot in the flank over there and try and open that up a little bit for the Crusaders. So that's his 1 command pip. Let's go down to the back of the battlefield. Let's see what we can do with our mighty Knights Templar. So the good news is we did roll some command points down here, so we've got 5 to work with. The Knights are going to have to turn, I think, and they're going to have to deal with the imminent threat of the Javelin Cavalry. So they're Knights Templar, they're going to go into combat. And then I think that it's time for Baleen and the supporting Knights to do something. So they're going to come in, covering the flank there. So that's 1, 2. He cannot get all the way up to support him, but he can get to here, while still leaving a little bit of room to fall back on this side. So that's 1, 2, 3. With the remaining 2, we're actually going to get ourselves a little bit more room here. And we're going to pull these guys into formation. I'm not sure that's a good plan, but that'll at least buy us some space while the Knights try to win this battle. If the Knights can win down here, then they have a chance to help these guys out. If the Knights lose, it probably won't matter anyway. So since we're back here, why don't we go ahead and finish these combats, and then we'll go to the front of our line and see how the Crusaders make out at the front. So we'll pause for a second, and then we'll roll out these combats. So it's the Crusaders' turn, so they get to decide the order of the combat, which will make a difference here, because ideally we'd like to win this one first, because that opens up the overlap, or reduces the overlap on the Templar. So the horse bow would normally be a 3, but they've been hitting the flank, so they are going to go down to a 2. So these horse bow are a 2. The Knights charging in are going to be a 4. 4 versus mounted for the Knights. So the Knights be rolling the yellow dice, and the Saracens the green, and let's see what happens. Okay, so the Knights score 6, the Saracens score 5. Unfortunately for the Saracens, where they would normally be able to escape from the situation, they cannot, because once they turn, they won't be able to fall back their full base step, so this unit's destroyed. Not good for the Saracens. And of course the Knights, being Knights, will charge forward. They won't quite make contact with the next unit, but they always charge forward when they win. So that makes it much better for the Templars. So Templars now have a 4 up to a 5 because they're special for this particular scenario only. They act like a general, their own little mini general. And the Javelin Cavalry is only a 2. Now the Jav Cav do shatter Knights, so if they get really lucky, they could still make out okay here. So let's see what happens. But they didn't. So we have a 11 to a 6. However, they are not doubled, so fortunately they didn't get doubled. They do have just enough room behind the other guy to fall back. So they will fall back to this position here. But the Knights, of course, will charge forward. So the Templars will stay in combat with these guys until either they withdraw or somebody dies. Alright, so that's the combats in the rear. Let's move up towards the front. So in the front, the only combat we have is still our bow levy and our Knights. So we've got the Knights, once again, they're still overlapped. So they're going to be a 3, not their usual 4, versus mounted. And the Jav-Cav will still be, or Javelin Cavalry will still be a 2. And we'll use our black die for Raymond and our white die for, or sorry, our red die for Saladin. I want to switch this dice in the middle of the game. And let's see what we get. Okay, well, the Knights have an 8. The Jav-Cav have a 4. So the Jav-Cav have been doubled, so they're destroyed, and the Knights charge forward. It's an interesting thing. So if this had been horsebow, that doubling would have caused a panic where they would have backed up, turned around, and they would have run 8 MU towards the rear of the board, not wanting to have anything behind them because it would destroy them. But Jav-Cav have the ability to shatter Knights because they pull them in closer, but that pulling them in closer also means that they can be killed by the Knights when doubled. So Jav-Cav are destroyed, the Knights charge forward. Doesn't really help the bow levy any because the bow levy is still in danger. But let's see how he makes out. So he's a 2 because he's overlapped. And our Saracen Elite Cav is a 3. So we will use our white dice and our black dice. Black is for the bow levy. Uh-oh. So the bow levy, 5 to 3. Not good enough. They didn't get doubled, but they did get shattered. So the bow levy are destroyed. That's okay. They were just in the way of the Knights charging anyway. So our tactical situation at the end of the Crusaders' turn, punched a small hole with 1 unit of Knights here. Oh, whoop, we got one more combat. We did get rid of the bow levy, so that cleared that path for the Cavalry battle that's going to be coming. And we have one more I almost forgot about, because Guy has finally decided to do something. He has a Knight in contact with a Lightfoot, which the Lightfoot do not like. So Lightfoot, normally be a 2 versus mounted. He's only a 1 because he got hit in the flank. So he's going to be, let's use our proper dice, a 1 for getting hit in the flank. And our Knight is only a 3 against foot, but in the open against these Lightfoot, the Knight will shatter the Lightfoot. So if the Knight wins, he's going to shatter that Lightfoot. Let's see what he rolls. Oh, but he didn't do so good. So he got a 7, and the Knight only got a 4. So the Knight actually will back off. Apparently, these Lightfoot are a lot tougher than he thought, or the Knight's a lot thirstier than he realized. So that does end the combat for this round. Looks like we're setting it up for a big cavalry battle in the front. Things are still up in the air, almost a draw in the rear guard, and maybe King Guy and Saladin will actually engage in this battle sometime soon. So with that, we're going to roll our command pips for the Saracen side. Okay, command pips for the Saracens. Alright, so we have 3 for our rear command. Our Saladin has 3 and our front has 2. So let's think about what we're going to do with those command pips up in the front. Well, things that make you go, I think in this particular situation, Saladin's probably going to do some of the things that we mentioned earlier. So he has, this horsebow is a Saladin's command. It's in line of sight, so it's still in command. I think he has to turn that guy onto the flank of the Knights, because you just can't pass up that opportunity. The Knight will be in trouble here. He doesn't have any place to go if he loses. These Lightfoot are in trouble, but because they weren't able to finish them off in the last turn, the Saracen Cavalry has a chance to come over and at least put them in zone of control. I can't quite get to them. These are Elite Cav. They're a little bit slower than the the faster light cav. But he can get right to that corner there. So he can get over here, and he can put him in zone of control. So that's 1-2 command pips, and you never really want to send the guy in alone if you can avoid it. Do I want to break up that group, or do I want to move Saladin? Oh, what the heck. Saladin hasn't done anything. Let's put Saladin right there. So now I have a group of cavalry that are in zone, that are putting this knight in zone of control. So now this knight cannot continue his attack towards the infantry because he has to deal with the troops that are actually putting him in zone of control. So that's Saladin's 3 pips. What can we do here? Well, it would be really, really nice if we could somehow help our friend that's trying to kill the knight. So I think we're going to do that same move again where we moved forward and touched the group, touched the single knight with a group. So if this unit was to move forward, straight forward, let's see if that lines up right. Like this. This will force this knight to conform. And we really like that. That looks good. Ideally, you'd like to help out a little bit here. We can't. Now, what we could do, if I was thinking this through and working with my partner, when he lines up on this knight, he could line up here or he could line up here. If he lines up here, this horsebow can actually move over and create an overlap. So 1-2 command pips, Saladin's guy, because the entire front covers the knight, placing it on a corner, that allows for us to have that overlap effect. So we now have a formation here overlapping the knight. So that's our front moves for both Saladin and Taki Aldin. So let's go back and go Gorbarakai back in the back. He has 3 command pips, and he has a problem. He's got knights to the front of him, knights to the rear of him. He really, really doesn't like this particular situation. I'm not sure if he's got a good way out of it. So this horsebow can't attack here because he's in zone of control, or would be in zone of control of that knight. Or is he? Yeah, so he's not in his zone of control, but he would be if he tried to cover the flank of that knight. So he can't hit the flank of that knight. He can turn, but if he turns, then he will be in zone of control, and he would have a limitation on his speed. So the question is, does he want to do that? Or do they want to try and do something else? You can also try and kill some of this infantry. Well, let's do that, because we haven't done any infantry fights yet. So with 1 command pip, this line's going to come forward. This is a gentle hill. It doesn't interfere with the horse's movement. It does provide an uphill advantage if you are uphill on the combat edge. So when these guys come forward, they will do that oblique move over. They had plenty of movement to do it. They will align with the enemy. Part of the combat edge will take place on this hill. This guy is closer to the crest line of the hill than this guy, so he'd actually have an uphill advantage, believe it or not. That's pretty useful. And now the question is, that's 1 command pip. He's got 3 more, and he's kind of in trouble. So you could bring the guys down off the hill into the smoke, which might be useful. So we've used 1 command pip, and we have a couple more to spend. At this point, I think I would make this turn. This creates an overlap on the knight. This touching right here is just really close touching. There's no combat there. It does move him into zone of control, but that's okay. He can do that. He's not attacking another unit. He's just providing overlap. So with the remaining command pips, what will we do next? All right, with the third command pip that we have left, we're going to try and move our general up into a place where he can support. He can't quite get into overlap, but we can move him in here to support because we may need that. And that's what we'll do. So now let's go ahead and we've made our moves. We'll go ahead and roll our combats. I think we'll start here at the back of the line since we're already here, and then we'll go to the front. All right, so the Saracens, they get to decide the order of the combat. And I think what we're going to do, since this doesn't affect other combats, we're going to go ahead and roll this one first. So my Jav Cav is a 2. My Knight General Templars, or Super Duper Templar Knights, would have been a 5, but they are down 1 for the overlap. So that's why we did that move there. And let's go ahead and roll it and see what we end up with. Oh boy. Nice high rolls. Nobody gets doubled and nobody gets shattered. So once again, the Javelin Cavalry will back up and the Templar Knights will charge forward. So they're going to, one way or another, eventually they run out of board, but we'll see how this goes. So now let's move over to our infantry versus mounted fight. So let's look at the numbers here. The Javelin Cavalry would normally be a 3 versus foot. The horsebow would normally be a 2 versus foot. However, it's a 3 in this case because he does have a slight uphill advantage because there is part of the combat edge on a hill, and he's closer to the top of the hill. The Jav Cav in the center would be a 3, and the archers would be a 4, but they do shatter archers. So this is one of those cases where we have to think about it. The Jav Cav and the horsebow cannot be killed when fighting these guys, but they can be killed by the archers. So one of the questions is, do we want to try and go for the potential shattering of the archers first? Because if these guys lose, they're only a 3 to a 3, and they're a 3 to a 3. If either one of them lose, it makes it much worse for the center. Now, of course, if they win, it makes it much better for the center. So this is one of those tricky questions where the guy that's running has to decide. I think we're going to try our luck on one end and see if we can get lucky. So the horsebow, they're going to be a 3. Horsebow would normally be a 2. The uphill gives them a 3. So we're going to try our luck on the end and see if the horsebow can push these guys off, thus giving the Jav Cav a slight advantage. So we have a 3 to a 3. Rolling our dice. Uh-oh. So we have 8 to 6. That's great because that pushes these guys off. So that did exactly what we wanted to by giving the Jav Cav that slight advantage here now. So these guys would go to a 3 and they would be a 3, so it'd be even up. Now the question is, do we want to press our luck and try that again? Why not? It worked so well the first time. So we're going to go to this end of the line, and these Jav Cav will also be a 3, and the foot will be a 3. There's no overlaps on that end. Let's see if we can get a double overlap on the archers. Uh-oh. They did it. So we have a 4 to a 5. These guys will back up. So that worked out just exactly the way we wanted it. They now have a 3. It's exactly the way I planned it. And the archers go down to a 2. So they started at 4 in close range fire, or close range combat versus mounted. They're a 4. Double overlap, they go to a 2, but they are shattered by the Jav Cav, and the Jav Cav are a 3. So let's see what happens. 5 to 7. So it's a good thing that we had that double overlap. So in this particular case, the Jav Cav will back off. Well, that's interesting. All right, so didn't work out quite the way we planned, but it did save our butts by having the double overlap for the Saracens. So let's go down to the other end of the line and see how things are going over there. Well, up here we still have our brave knight that bravely charged in and killed the Javelin Cavalry, but now he is flanked and overlapped. So he starts at a 4. Hitting the flank is going to give him a 3, and the overlap gives him a 2. So he's down to a 2. Horsebow versus mounted. They actually are a little bit better versus mounted than they are versus foot. So they start at a 3, and they'll stay a 3. We have our white dice and our black dice. Black dice for the knights. Now, in this particular case, yeah, the knight does not have any place to go if he loses, so he'll be destroyed. Let's see what happens. Oh, we have an 8 to a 5. So 8 to 5. So the knight wins. That will force this one to fall back. Now, because it was a flank attack, the knight does not turn and pursue. He doesn't turn, he doesn't pursue. He was hitting the flank, he stays where he is. Otherwise, the knight would pursue if he was winning normal combat. Now, if by some miracle of miracles the knight had actually doubled, so let's say this had been a 1, if he had doubled the horsebow, unfortunately for the knights, they can't kill them in a straight fight. They have to trap them. So the horsebow, in that case, would have backed up, turned around 180 degrees, and then made a complete 8 MU move towards the rear, or towards the direction away from the knight. But in this case, he didn't double him. He just pulls back. Knight doesn't charge forward. Okay, so our next knight, he's also going to be a 2. Not because of flank, but because he's double overlapped. So he's got horses on either side, unopposed. And the elite cav versus mounted is going to be a 3. So elite cav are +3 versus foot, +3 versus mounted. They're your general all-purpose armored and well-equipped cavalry. Black dice for the knight, white dice for the Saracens. Whoops, we have definitely what I call a cocked situation there. Okay, so we have a 4 to a 4. That's a lock. So nothing happens. That knight's gonna hold him off. That's exactly what he was meant to do, and that's what he did. So now we're gonna move on to the Crusader's turn.